In the 1700s, Africans enslaved in New York dug graves to bury their dead, here, in the ground, directly beneath us.
Basically, we've got a cemetery that's on the south shore of a lake, a very hilly property, actually 25 feet below Broadway, the surface that you're walking on today.
English maps of the time labeled the graveyard the Negro's burial ground, but to those who used it, it had a more relevant name.
They called it the African burial ground. Every opportunity they had to say the name Africa with respect, they used it.
It also shows community and the building and this creation of this community that's essential to these folks and essential to African people today. Africans recognized, their Africanness and celebrated it and honored it. And there's no better place, a more important, more sacred place to do that, but in a burial ground.
The burial ground was located north of a fortress-like wooden wall that enslaved people were forced to build. Slaves were the primary laborers for the colony. The Lenape, Native Americans, were the first inhabitants with their farms and homes and trails, and the Africans were the next major labor force.
These are the people who built Broadway. They built the wall. From Albany to Argentina, this is the story of how African labor helped to shape the Americas, the Caribbean. And there's no better population, there's no better group of people who can tell this story than the people who were buried in the African burial ground.
Although their lives were harshly controlled, Africans in New York actively resisted enslavement.
The essence of slavery was a brutality to the soul and to the mind. It was a basic deprivation of humanity. Now, the fact that that was imposed on people doesn't mean that they accepted that. Those who were enslaved, at every possible moment, sought to give voice, give action to their humanity, to show forth their humanness, to reach out to the humanity of others.
The burial ground became a place where enslaved Africans expressed compassion for one another and buried their dead with respect.
No other species of animal buries its dead. We, human beings, are partly defined by the act of treating our dead in a special way. One could no more deny those Africans in New York the burial of their dead than deny them the right to speak, to stand and walk erect on two legs, to use tools, to be human.
The African burial ground was also a place of peace and rest, but rest was an elusive state for enslaved New Yorkers. Their lives were dominated by work.
Lie, lie, it'll lie. Lie, lie, it'll lie. Lie, lie, it'll lie. Lie, lie, it'll lie.
It's a world of work. Slavery is about work. Many ordinary people think of slavery primarily about violence. Violence did enforce the limits of slavery, but slavery was about work, and all children were expected to work.
As soon as a child could pick up a broom and sweep, that child became valuable. As soon as a child could run errands, and they did at a fairly early age, they became valuable to the owner.
One of the things that slavery did was to cut childhood short. Very few slaves had any childhood. As soon as they were able to fetch, they were at work.
Amelia.
So within a household, you might have a woman and her children, of course, within the household of her owner. And that woman is expected to labor throughout the day and the night as well for her owner and for the owner's family, so she's taking care of his children.
Parents fought to keep their children protected and near, but enslaved children had to grow up fast. On this sad day, Amelia is sent on an important errand. Her father has died. Her mother gives her a keepsake to take to the elder, who is preparing her father for burial. This is not the first time Amelia has walked alone through town, but each time she does, she sees other Africans living within the confines of slavery.
One of the most important things, I think, to see about that world is that it was a small world. Manhattan is a small place at that time. It's an urban setting, but of course it's a small urban setting. The second thing that I would say about their lives is that they were very diverse people. They came from West and Central Africa, from various different cultures within the continent of Africa. They came from the Caribbean.
She would have seen people at work. She herself was working. She is seeing the city grow. I just believe that this burial ground is so important to understand the enslavement of millions of Africans, because we're not often thinking of enslaved Africans being the ones who are clearing the land. They're the colony builders. If there's a word that should be synonymous with slave, it's colony builders, because that's what they're doing in New York.
African people laid the foundations for virtually everything that we know about the Americas during the 17th and 18th centuries.
The burial ground for Africans was closed in 1795, nearly 20 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The graveyard became a landfill, all but forgotten under the buildup of Lower Manhattan. Then, graves were discovered in 1991.
It's a graveyard right in the heart of downtown, and it's already surprising some historians. Jeff Weiser has more in this exclusive report.
While government officials have withheld comment and have sealed the site from the public, Fox News has learned that archaeologists have discovered a historic site at this location at 290 Broadway, where a federal office building is scheduled to be built between Duane and Reed Streets.
The first time that I heard about it was, actually, I read about it. There was a news blurb. It was an announcement that this had been a cemetery for enslaved people.
There were people who have said to me, I've always had a feeling that there was something special about this area, but I didn't know what it was. And this rediscovery tells me that this was a place where I belonged and I had a history here.
I went there, went down into the burial ground, and what I saw overwhelmed me, and I still feel a certain emotional trauma.
What did bother me was knowing that they were African people who had been allowed to lay in the ground all of these years, and buildings were put on top of them.
The Africans, see, they rose for a reason. It didn't just happen. It was time for them to surface, because it's time for us to move back to the center stage. It's time for us to claim and take back who we are.
As news of the burial ground spread, the African American community expressed concern about the human remains being unearthed.
I think those of us who gathered there in that period felt shut out of something that we felt we should have been a part of.
Outrage and disgust arose from the cavalier manner that GSA administrators sought to treat the unearthing of the remains.
How will the government then acknowledge the fact that this was a cemetery?
The 2 points that the community has requested that I cannot satisfy is a matter
The outpouring of very deep emotions, which may have been underlaying or hidden within people for decades.
Community members staged numerous protests against the building's construction. For many, this struggle echoed the experiences of their enslaved ancestors.
When we think of resistance, we need to look at all of those various forms. We need to look at cultural resistance as well. I think the fact that people are insistent on retaining their culture is a form of resistance. That's an African characteristic. That's an African cultural retention.
And it was very important for Africans to assert and reaffirm their humanity to themselves and to one another. And so their struggle for the cemetery is a struggle for human rights in the most fundamental way.
I want to assure all those gathered here that GSA has the greatest sensitivity to both the historic significance of the site and
I think that was best crystallized by the statement of former Mayor David Dinkins when he said, "This is our Ellis Island." He meant that our inevitable victory over it, our accession, and our eventual ability to become free in this country came through that little area in Lower Manhattan.
I am not going to be a part of your disrespecting what people here testify, scholars have called, the most important archaeological discovery in this century. But I'm going to do, Gus Savage, everything in my power to make you change your obstinacy and your disrespect for a sector of this city. And with that having been said,
in time, a compromise was struck. The government would finish its construction, but adjacent to the building, a memorial would be built where the graves were first discovered. Federal officials collaborated closely with the local black community, leading to the designation of the site as a national monument. The human remains were sent to Howard University in Washington, D.C. for study. Researchers examined the bones to determine what life was like for enslaved Africans. From the start, people identified closely with the human remains.
The one question that people really wanted to know was, are there really bones there? I mean, you can really see the bones. They would say, well, are you going to show the bones? And the way I interpreted the question really was to say, I want you to make this real for me. The significance of that ground, it being a burial ground, that's the tangible reminder. That's what makes it real for us.
They're living lives in constrained and ugly circumstances, being worked beyond their endurance. It's a life of pain and suffering, not simply psychic and emotional. Physical pain and suffering.
I guess the gist of it is that this is an abused population. New York is like these other places in which the conditions of slavery are very harsh, in which people are worked to death because they are, in a sense, disposable.
When the research at Howard University was completed, federal agencies worked closely with the descendant community to return the remains to the burial ground. The reinterment ceremony was the culmination of 6 days of tribute and celebration that began in Washington, D.C.
The bones were going to be transported back, and there were community meetings around that. So all along the way, these stops, you were brought in a dramatic way to the full panorama of our history. I thought it was deeply moving.
At the end of her journey, Amelia climbs stairs at the rear of a tavern to a cluttered attic. There, the elder prepares her father and her cousin, a newborn, for burial. Both died suddenly from a fever. As she watches, Amelia remembers her father. He was a cooper, a barrel maker. She will miss him. Late in the afternoon, Amelia's mother fetches her for the procession to the burial ground. Though authorities forbade burials after dark, mourners often ignored the rules to make sure their loved ones were properly buried.
I don't think that anyone knows for sure exactly what's happening in the burial, but we do know there's some solemnity to it. There's also some celebration.
Ago. Amen. Ago. Amen. Ago. Amen. I am here today. Are you here today? Are you here today? We are here today to give thanks for the life of Kwame John and to this newborn girl, Efwa, whose life had barely begun. Do you hear me? Yes. Do you hear me? Yes. Ancestors, we are here today to give thanks for the gift of life. We are here today to give thanks for both of their lives. And thank you for all of our blessings. Our beloved Kwame is with you now, ancestors. Now, it is time for us to remember. I want the family to remember. I remember. Do you remember Kwame? Yes. Do you remember Kwame? I remember Kwame. Kwame was my husband. He was a father. Kwame was a good man. I remember Kwame. I remember how strong he was. Such strength before the sickness cut him low. Kwame, we must leave. You are an ancestor now. Guide us and protect us. Share your strength with us. We will call upon you.
I think every African American wonders where our roots were. What countries in Africa were we indigenous? And in the end, this is not Black history. This is American history. But it's American history that's finally been told.